have a little play button.
All right. I think that maybe we are actually live now.
Give it a 10 seconds.
All right.
I'll tell you.
So hello, everybody. I am almost 100% sure we're live, so I will talk as if we are.
Keep going for a moment.
I hope everybody out there is having a good last week before. Is it Memorial Day on Monday?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is there a difference between Memorial Day or a holiday and just a day ending in Y right now?
I don't have to work.
There's a huge difference. Yeah.
But what are you going to do? What are you going to do with your time? Okay, you've got a day off, and I think for people out there, I think we have decided that scientists stuck inside is going to take Monday off as well. So
yeah.
Somehow we've decided that we need a vacation. I'm not sure exactly from what or what that will entail, but anyway. So what are you going to do with your time off on Monday?
I have a lot of comic books piled up that I have not read yet. So my habit is I normally go to Starbucks on the weekends and read comics and get coffee. And I have not done that for several weekends, and I will continue to not go to Starbucks this weekend, but maybe I will actually read comics. So
read comics.
They've started shipping again. They stopped for a month or two, and now everything's starting to be published again.
Don't take offense. I saw a cartoon online. And it started, the first frame of the cartoon were a bunch of people, university administrators talking, and we have to open in the fall because if we don't, the university just won't be here. What? You just want to sacrifice all those people? We have no choice. And somebody comes in and says, well, no, actually, we don't have to sacrifice anybody. We just have to have the right fraction of the people come back. And I've been looking at these networks. And if you look out on the ends of these networks, there are people out there who only interact with other people when they have to, on their way to finding some dark, secluded place where they will spend hours upon hours upon hours. And we just have to invite them back. And then the final frame is a student sitting here looking and saying, all right, the computer science program's open.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to remember that one.
Anyway. So what about you, Dave? What are you going to do on Monday?
I'm going to be doing a little bit of writing on some books for the future here. On various things.
You're guilting me.
The need for we haven't run out of books to do yet. So on it goes.
No. So what's happening? You're a publisher. You're involved in that business. What impact is COVID having on the publishing business?
It's actually having an okay impact. You hate to say this in any way, shape, or form, but with us at the magazine, with the book promotion, people are reading a lot. They're staying at home. They're reading a lot. They're engaged with things. They're discovering topics they haven't had the time to read about. I think it's actually somewhat good times for the publishers right now, at least momentarily.
Okay. So you're saying that the country that emerges from COVID is going to be smarter than the country that entered COVID?
A few people, at least in the country. Yeah. If not the country at large. Yes. Selected persons.
Yeah.
Our goal is to make sure they know more about astronomy.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I think, are just rushing out to bars and they're not necessarily reading anything but menus with bar food and beer selections.
Well, but no, I was kind of factoring that in.
Yeah.
Because the people who are just running off to bars and reading bar menus, there's going to be a statistical reduction of that part of the population in comparison with the part of the population that is staying home and reading astronomy and such as that. So, it all kind of works together.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
It all kind of works together. So what is opening up? We didn't go out. We for the first time since this thing started, day before yesterday was our wedding anniversary. So my wife and our daughter and I went out and got takeout from a Indian place that we like. And I think that literally the first time in 2 months that we've had anything that we didn't cook ourselves. I don't know how people who don't know how to cook are coping right now. That would be hard.
Poorly. The people
But
that I know that cannot cook are
yeah,
very
yeah,
stressed all the time.
yeah. But it was like, it was like crazy. There was like rush hour traffic, and there were, you know, parking lots full of people and so on and so forth. What are you guys seeing up there?
It's kind of the same. I mean, I went to Chicago actually this last weekend, which was, I think I mentioned, really the first time I had seen anybody for 2 months.
Mhm.
And my sister and I did actually end up carrying out pizza, which was amazing. I had not had pizza in a very long time. It was really good. And ice cream. I had pizza and ice cream. It was magical. But I mean, like we mentioned, there were a lot of people out. They were all wearing masks, at least in Chicago, but there was still a lot of traffic. I mean, even me just driving down to Chicago and back, it did not seem like there was any less traffic than there normally is.
So what are we, now that we have decided that we're going to open up, what are you guys? Allison, give us your shot. Tell us what the next month is going to look like.
I think it really depends. So, I mean, I feel like what's going to happen right now is it's going to come down to not science or best policy. It's going to come down to personal judgment. So, like for me, the next month is going to look exactly like the last 2 months. I'm going to go out only when I have to, probably go to the grocery store. I may now once go to the comic store or something, but that might be my one other thing that I do. I think, personally, it's not gonna look any different for me. I think for a lot of the country, it is gonna look very different. People want to be told that it's okay to go back to their normal lives. That's what they want. And I think they're going to, and I think it's gonna look very different in a couple weeks. We might see some more spikes, I think is what we're all kind of thinking.
Yeah, let's see if I don't know if I can make this thing where people can see it or not, but I'm gonna try. I'm gonna share my screen for just a second, and apologies if this is too small to see at all. Here we go. Where am I? Share screen. All right, there we go. I think I am now sharing my screen. And for those, is somebody looking? Can you tell me if you can see that at all?
I will as soon as the YouTube feed catches up.
Okay. Anyway, what we're looking at here is a paper that just came out of the Arizona Biodesign at Arizona State University. And there it is. Okay, I think that
yes, you're good.
And for those who pay attention to what goes on in Arizona, you might remember that a couple of weeks ago that there was sort of a big falderall about the governor saying that he was going to shut off the ongoing university-based modeling and deny them access to data and all of this kind of stuff. And there was a pushback on that. And he finally said, well, okay, they can still have their data and so on and so forth. We now understand why it was that he was so terribly anxious not to have what those folk were doing reach the light of day. They just released a paper showing their projections. And what has happened basically is that by lifting all the lockdown, we've gone right back to the conditions under which things were growing exponentially a matter of a couple of months ago. And the models show that that's exactly what's going to happen. And so if you look, you probably can't see it very well. I'll just read it off. You are here, if you can see my little cursor moving. So that's where we are today. And then depending on exactly what you assume, here is now the accumulated deaths. And by the time you get out to something like, mid-September or some such, these predictions for Arizona are looking at something like, 40, 50,000 deaths, as opposed to I forget exactly what our number is today, but it's a fairly small fraction of that. And so the situation that we're in is that we have recreated how things were when this thing took off in the first place. We know what happens. It's not hard to look at that and say, all right, the same thing's going to happen again. So it's going to feel good for a week or so. And then the numbers are going to start climbing again. and they're going to start climbing again. You know, they never have come down, so it's just going to pick up right where it left off. How are people going to respond to that when they've been told now, yeah, okay, it's safe to go back to work, it's safe to do this, it's safe to that, the lockdowns are lifted, it's okay, trust us, you can go back to work and start helping the economy and so on and so forth. What's going to happen when the people start piling up in body bags again?
It's not going to be good. And I think arguably even for a while, it's going to feel great for people. It may be 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, given the infection time and the time
Right.
by which someone becomes symptomatic. It may feel like a real liberation and like, oh, everything's right back to normal. And by the way, what were all of you guys panicking about this
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
ruining our lives and the economy and disrupting us and making us stay home and see even more on Netflix? But it's going to be bad. And it depends, of course, it's a huge set of variables because, you know, some people can go out and if they do stay 6 feet away from everyone else, and if they are careful about anyone coughing or breathing on them or sneezing or other micro droplets or, you know, not wearing a mask and so on, you know, maybe there will be for a lot of people some relative safety in a prolonged way going out again. But you're playing Russian roulette with this stuff. And a lot of people, I went out both on the weekend here and day before yesterday and did some errands. And there are a lot of people out there in this area, a bedroom community outside of Milwaukee, who don't have masks and who clearly, now maybe they're all cohabitating all the time, but I doubt it, are in groups wandering around right next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of evidence here that I see of people are not taking these safety measures seriously, at least anymore. And that's going to come back unquestionably 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 weeks from now in a huge boomerang effect. And I think it's going to be shocking to some people then. How can this all be happening again? You said it, you inferred it was all okay. At least some of you did.
Yeah, I mean, the reality, of course, is that it doesn't make any difference what any politician does or says. It doesn't make any, you know, that it is the pandemic that is driving these things. It's the biology. And until you actually wrap your head around the biology, until you actually get control of that, then none of this other stuff means anything. You know, you can, and it's unfortunate. I mean, there was an article, was it today's New York Times, yesterday's New York Times, that came out with the article that was looking at, okay, what did the delays in lockdown do? Mm-hmm. And the models coming out of Columbia University had lockdowns come about a week earlier, then we've about twice as many people have died as would have died. And had we locked down 2 weeks earlier, 6 times as many people have died as would have died. And so it's that business of exponential growth that people just don't understand, that we're in a place where a few days difference in how we respond makes a tremendous difference in what the downstream impacts are going to be.
Which is really, that's really counterintuitive too, to how humans are wired to think.
Yeah, but again, my question again, and I just really don't get it. If you know, okay, had we shut down 2 weeks earlier, then as of today, it would have saved something like almost 80,000 lives. And so that extra 2 weeks that we were open, as of today, cost 80,000 people their lives. But of course, it's continuing to rise. And so really, it's whatever on any given day going forward from here, you take the number of people that have died and you divide by roughly 6, and that's how many people would have died had we locked down, a couple of weeks earlier. And we're throwing everything back open again. And what that means, the early predictions looked at this and said, all right, if this thing just runs rampant, then we might expect to see something like 2.5 million people in the United States die. And if you look at that, it's okay, 2.5 million people. So that's what, 2.5 10 to the 6, and 100th of that is 2.5 10 to the 4. Okay, and so you're talking about then 5 10 to the 50,000. There you go. Of course, the models that came out of the ASU group said that we're going to see something like 50,000 deaths in Arizona, because that's just sort of our allotment of the number of deaths that are coming.
Mm-hmm.
So when are people?
Well, not only
how are people going to respond?
I think it's going to be grim, and it's going to be shocking to a lot of these people who thought that, well, it hasn't touched me, so it's not really that serious, which is a terrible fallacy to have. And not only are we going to have this sort of second wave now because people are going out and they're mixing up particles with each other more a few weeks from now, but then, of course, we're going to have this autumn change of complexity with the normal influenza season in the fall, confusing the hell out of diagnosing everyone and testing everyone as well, which is going to make it a real mess.
Yeah. Starting an influenza season with your healthcare infrastructure already grossly overloaded.
Right.
People talk about, in fact, not that many people die of influenza compared with what was once the case, because all right, there are vaccines and we do understand how to treat influenza, and in fact a lot of the scope of our ability to respond to intensive pulmonary problems is driven by, well, we've got to have what we need on hand to deal with the flu virus. What's going to happen when we have that times several?
Mm-hmm.
Flu is going to become a deadly disease again, on top of COVID being a deadly disease, just because of the overwhelm. So what is it? Again, speculate. I'm serious. I think about this a lot. I have been thinking about this a lot. I have been thinking about this, trying to find a reason not to just go step out into traffic somewhere, because Lord knows there's plenty of, I'm being facetious.
Good.
But Lord knows there's plenty of traffic to step out into around here. We are sailing head on, foot on the pedal, toward a brick wall that we know is there.
Are you trying to say that you're in the crow's nest in 1912 and you can see something on the horizon at night?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
And why don't more people see this?
Did you see the thing that talked about what if Trump had been the captain of the Titanic?
Oof.
No.
If anybody out there is listening and happens to know what I'm talking about and it pops up in the comments, we can read it. But it really is kind of delightful. No, there's no iceberg. And anyway, you get the idea. Yes, we hit the iceberg, but nothing's leaking. Yes, we're taking on water, but I'm a very great captain. Anyway. But I mean, seriously, what do you guys imagine this looks like? What are the options? What are the ways this might go over the coming months?
Allison, what do you think?
I mean, there's the ideal option, which is that people start paying attention to this. I mean, I think probably what's going to happen is most things are going to open up. Um, hopefully, you know, the intelligent people, the people that are concerned about this, which I do think is actually a pretty large fraction of the population, will continue social distancing and wearing masks and realizing that, hey, maybe I don't need to go out to eat tonight. You know, that's my hope. You know, and again, most of my friends and, you know, my sister and everything, you know, we're like, well, we're just not going to go out just because I can doesn't mean I'm going to. I'm hoping that that is mostly the case. And again, there are ways to at least be safer when you go out. Obviously, it's not safe, but you can be safer. And then there's the option where no one does that, and things get really, really bad. It's really hard to say. Again, you know, I know what I would do, but you know, that's not go to a bar, but clearly there are a lot of people that do go to bars. So
okay, but my
know?
question is, and you know, I could sit here and speculate, but I really want to know other people's thoughts. That all of those things are true, but the reality is that people are going to go to bars because they're doing it. That people are going to believe when they're told by people that it's safe to go out and do this, that, and the other thing, even though it's not. And so that's what is going to happen. What is going to happen in response to that is that numbers are going to off the charts. What's coming is going to be far worse than anything that we've seen, just because we're picking it up at the point that it left off before, and we're just say we're going to turn it loose. It's going to be as if we had never done anything. And so we know it's going to get bad, really bad. How are people going, at what point are people going to make the break and realize that, oh, we are killing now very possibly millions of people that didn't need to die?
Well, to be the pessimist, I'm going to say probably not until it's really bad.
Well, I agree.
They haven't already done it, so it's going to take a lot of deaths. It's going to have to get really bad, because that seems to be how people kind of work.
It's going to have to get very bad. And the CDC and other places have talked about, you know, now you may have, you know, a dozen or 15 hotspot smaller cities that in which a New York City-like experience takes place over the coming weeks and months. And, you know, that kind of a thing happening again in a big way, but spread all over the place, may help to shock people enough. But I think a lot of people are not going to care unless it really touches them. The Civil War touched essentially every family in the United States of America. The 1918 pandemic touched, I don't know if every family in America, but it touched so many families that everyone knew of. You know, it may take that kind of widespread shock that touches the whole country that we have not yet seen. Given the denial that some people have about this, or the mistrust, or the lack of understanding. It may take, I agree with Allison, those kind of staggering numbers, and happening in middle America, not just in the elite, the New York City, the media, New York and Washington and LA and Chicago, big cities. If it starts happening to middle Americans, here, there, and everywhere, that may change the dynamic dramatically.
I don't have the graphics where I can put them up, but it is very interesting what you see if you look at what's going on with cases and with deaths across the country. And in the Northeast, where of course, you know, New York dominated what happened, but overall the Northeast, you see things are now headed back down. On the West Coast, where there was good response in a lot of places in California and Oregon and Washington, that the numbers don't look bad. Throughout the rest of the country, you know, the South is kind of overall kind of doing this and trending up. If you look at the Midwest is just doing that. And so, yeah, I I mean, you're right. There are all sorts of jokes that can be told if you're cynical and like gallows humor, and I'm cynical and like gallows humor. So, I all the jokes about Darwin saying, "Shh, I got this." But the reality is that there are all of these people out there who are just they're cannon fodder for the economy. They're lambs to the slaughter. Children are going to be among them because there is so much push. Like I think the governor here in Arizona just came out, I think it was yesterday, said, "Oh, I'm really pretty sure we're just going to be able to open schools in the fall," and so on and so forth. This was just after the ASU study came out showing that in that kind of time frame, we're going to be looking at 50,000 deaths, for crying out loud.
Mm-hmm.
And that, which was the report that he had tried to shut down. And so that's another aspect of all of this thing. Where do you turn if you are, people like us? We say, okay, there's a real honest to goodness literature out there. I'm not sure about you guys, but I find myself reading the epidemiology literature and the medical literature and that kind of stuff if I'm interested in honestly knowing what answers are. Mm-hmm. Or at the very least, you go and you read a synopsis in Scientific American or Nature or someplace.
Mm-hmm.
But for so many people, they have this notion that if the government says it's safe to do X, then that means it must be safe to do X.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have the governor of Arizona having right in front of his face something that says that by the fall we are going to be looking at 50,000 deaths. And what does he say? "Oh, I'm just sure that we're going to be able to be back in school," because politically that's what he's supposed to say. Mm-hmm. And people listen.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Because in the ideal world, your government is reading that literature or having someone read that literature and translating it and paying attention to it. I mean, that is how I think it should work. When the government says it's safe, it should be safe. But, again, we're relying on people's common sense. And, again, people like us know that, no, I'm not going to go out just because I can. I mean, even the other day, we're in a fortunate situation, with our employer that they're okay with us continuing to work from home. But I'm like, well, what if in 3 months they're not okay with me working from home and this is still a problem? What do I do then? So it's, mm-hmm. I think, obviously a lot of people are going to be facing that kind of choice. People are facing that kind of choice now. Again, I'm fortunate enough not to be, but there are people that are facing that choice where, I have to go into work because now the government says it's safe to open and it's not actually safe to open,
Mm-hmm.
It's
mm-hmm.
a really difficult situation.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the South, Jeff, but there are other, reasons to fear the coming weeks here. The percentage of the population in the South and in the Middle West has a much higher incidence of complicating factors than many of the urban areas. Obesity, diabetes, other diseases that make this much more dangerous for secondary infections and other complications. So, if people, let's just, because I love studying the Confederacy, but let's just say that Alabama, is one of these places that really casts caution to the wind and says, well, it's back to normal now. What's going to happen if these infections spread quickly then through a closed population there where there's relatively primitive healthcare compared to urban hospitals? Mm-hmm. The numbers of beds are relatively minimal, and you have a lot of people who already have compromising health situations. That's what scares me, is that in terms of the numbers of this taking off a month or two from now.
Yeah, there have been a lot of studies looking at that, understanding that for much of the country, it's a long way from where they are to an ICU bed.
Yep.
And as you say, the New York City is a place where the virus hit so hard so quickly because the population was very compact. But also, by virtue of that same reason, that means they had a very, very good world-class health response available.
And huge numbers of rooms and beds and ICU capacity.
Yeah. But the thing is that for most of the country, those kinds of facilities don't exist. And in fact, for most of the country, it's like, okay, if I get that sick, what they do is they put me on a they put me in some kind of transport and they take me to Atlanta or to New York City or to wherever.
I hope there's a lot of jet fuel for helicopters, then, is all I have to say.
Well, there's no domestic flights at the moment. So
right. Indeed.
Or there are so few that
it's and so that's yet and of course there are the racial implications of what you're talking about there. I mean, the Black community in the South is being hit much harder by this than the white community.
That's right.
But so, and on the economic side, of course, the jobless numbers are incredibly high right now. And there was a study that came out of University of Chicago, I think, that said that their take was that 42, not that 42 means anything, but their number was that their simulation was that 42% of jobs that have been lost so far aren't coming back, that those are in fact permanent job losses. And some of that has to do with declines in economic activity, but a lot of that also has to do with things that we've talked about before. You know, okay, I'm sitting here right now and I can invest money right now in hiring some more people, or I can invest money in automating. Well, I'm going to invest money in automating. Or I'm sitting here right now and everybody is working from home and this is actually working fairly well. And so we had been thinking about building another $umpty-ump million corporate structure, but in fact, we don't need that. And so there's a whole industry that's going to be hit, tremendously hard by all of this. And of course, associated with each one of those industries, okay, people are going to be working from home. Yeah, that means people are going to be working from home, but that also, of course, means that the restaurateurs and the street vendors and, all of the people who then make their living off of that traffic. And so it is this incredible dislocation that we're looking at. And it's a dislocation that if we just say we're going to let free market capitalism have its way, it's going to be a dislocation that just destroys millions upon millions of people. And yet it's a dislocation that if we could say, no, we need to rethink the way that we are distributing goods, services, so on and so forth, then we have all that we need to be certain that everyone is safe and taken care of. And so it's the right thing to do, even if you look at it from just a straight economic standpoint, would be to say we really need to just shut things down completely. We need to keep them shut down completely for a matter of several months until the numbers actually get small enough where we've got it under control, so that contact tracing and things like that honestly become possible. And then we need to actually get smart about the way that we reopen things.
Jeff,
and yet we're not going to do it.
Is that going to happen in these United States of America?
Had you asked me, would they have happened in these United States of America in the 1960s, I would have said, yeah, we'd do that. Probably in the 1970s, I would have said, yeah, we'd do that. Kind of starting in the 1980s going forward, no, probably not.
Let me ask you this. If we really want to begin to be dark, Will we get back to a country ever that cares about each other like some other countries' citizens have already this year shown that they do?
Mhm.
I would like to think so. There are plenty of people still in this country who do care about each other. So, it's just a matter of giving them control again.
It's kind of interesting. You talk about what other nations have done, and of course, unlike when you talk about things like, okay, is there life elsewhere in the universe? Then what you always fall back on, well, we are the sample of one. And so how much can you learn from just us? We're the sample of one. In this case, we're not the sample of one. In this case, there are countries all over the globe that have responded to this in different ways.
Yep.
And we are the sample. We aren't a sample of one, but we do define one end. If you want to know the worst possible way to respond to this thing, you just look at the United States and say, that's how you do it. If you want to be as bad as you could possibly be, just do what the United States did.
And there are not many times in the history of this country when you could have said that about any situation.
Yeah, well,
now.
And so that, you put on the 4th of July is going to be a little bit strange this year, trying to figure out just exactly what it is that we're celebrating.
We're celebrating giving each other COVID by having barbecues. That's what's going to happen. I mean, that might happen this weekend. I don't know, but seems like what's going to happen to me.
I love it. There you go. Okay, now
our God-given right to give each other COVID.
A business opportunity. Take a food stand to one of these things for 4th of July and sell COVID burgers. And probably everybody will buy them because there will be one group of people who think that you're just being ironic and poking fun at the idiots who think that the COVID is a real thing. And there will be other people who will look at it and realize that, yeah, you're actually being sarcastic on the other side of the spectrum. So either everybody will love you or both sides will hate you and they'll burn your food truck. I'm not sure which, but anyway, okay, there you go. So there's a business opportunity. Anybody want to come out to Arizona? No, you don't want to come out to Arizona. Maybe I should come to Wisconsin for July 4th. Then we can get ourselves a food truck and go out on July 4th and sell COVID burgers. How about that?
If you throw in some bratwurst, it would probably work. So
COVID well,
I don't know if that's quite the same, but
boy, how could you do that? I mean, right now the Germans. I know one of the things going on right now is the Germans and the French, are working together hand in hand right now, trying to put together a relief package so that the EU as a whole will help the southern part of Europe that has been hit so heavily by this. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh man, when you look and you see the Germans and the French setting the standards for being buddy in the face of this thing, then this is a strange new world we live in.
It would be weirder as if the English and the French set up an alliance.
Well, true.
Yeah.
Well, but the reason the Germans and the French can do it is that the English were stupid enough to say, oh, we don't want to be part of any of that EU stuff.
Right.
So now the English, the UK is out there. The UK is, well, with the exception of Brazil's trying to, but with the exception of Brazil, maybe the UK is the only other nation out there that's given us a run for our money in terms of responding to this thing badly.
That's right.
And it's maybe not, in fact, it's not happenstance that's coming just as they're deciding that the EU is not for them. And this is happening to us just as we are deciding that we no longer want to be a leading nation in the world, which, let's face it, is what we have been deciding for the last some years now. So yeah, I mean, It's another interesting question. When we come out of this, what's going to be left of the United States on the world stage?
Fewer than 335 million people by some unknown number.
I mean, unfortunately, I don't know that that question wouldn't be relevant even if COVID hadn't happened at this point. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
getting political and into other things, but you know,
Right,
obviously,
right.
I
Okay, so imagine
Strange.
we're gonna
Wow.
everything's gonna happen the way it's gonna happen between now and November.
Mhm.
Let's be very, very hopeful and say that come November, against all odds, there is actually a fair election. Because I'm looking at what's going on, I'm kind of at the point that I doubt that there's going to be much of a fair election. That for Democrats to win come November is going to require huge numbers to overcome the kind of stuff being done. But anyway, let's say there's a fair election. Democrats sweep the Congress and the White House. Between November and January, Trump et al. Do as much damage as they can possibly do, trying to stick as much into their pockets before they have to leave as they can. Assuming that they leave, that's another interesting set of questions. But imagine that happens, and then finally January 21st comes around, and we have a new administration taking power in the midst of the total wreckage of a once great nation. What do you do? What if you were the, I hate to say Biden because Biden is the wrong person, but he's probably going to be the person. If you were Biden, what would you do on day one if you stepped into the White House?
I think that as much fun as we've had with this year, being the year that has disappeared and will continue to be, I think next year things are going to improve dramatically in this country and around the world. And I think it will be, if you believe the reports this morning about a vaccine, that will be around the corner much faster than we anticipate it could be. There are 100 teams working on it now. We might have a vaccine early next year. Who knows? That's what one CEO said this morning, of a major pharmaceutical company. I think that things are going to turn around and we're going to have some good things to talk about in the months coming ahead, at least after this year, if not into the middle of next year. So I don't think it will be the permanent ultimate decline of civilization or of this planet or even of this country the way it's been going, but that there will be great improvements, and it won't be normal. You're right, Jeff. Of course, you've been right all along. It will not be the way things were 6 months ago, ever again, in many ways. But we will have a sunshiny future coming ahead that will commence sometime next year.
Whoa.
Now, unfortunately, that's easy for me to say. A lot of people who are here now and who were here 6 months ago won't be here anymore. So in that sense, it will be irretrievably sad and horrible. But the as a nation and as a society, I think things ultimately will improve as they did after 1918, and quite frankly, as time went on and things improved given enough time after 50 million people in the with the Black Plague 700 years ago too, so I mean it will improve again. It's not going to be in the next few months, and a lot of people are going to lose their lives, and as we've just talked about, unnecessarily. Sad, which makes it gruesomely sad, especially if you see the way people with this disease are dying. It's terribly sad and lonely and isolated, but it's not yet the end of humanity or this country even going in the right direction.
Yep. I guess the question that I have, I'm looking downstream I in some ways imagine that you're right. That yeah, there will be, I think, probably a vaccine. I am, as I read the literature, a bit less hopeful about something that fast.
Well, it does,
Because
and I don't mean to interrupt you, but it does seem breathtakingly optimistic to say, January 15th, we'll have a vaccine, 100 million doses.
no, I think that is breathtakingly optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you actually look at where trials are now, there are certainly positive indications.
Yeah.
But then if you talk to people, and because of that, the press loves to grab a hold of that. Politicians love
Sure.
to grab a hold of that.
Sure.
People who are hoping that their stock prices will go up love to
Yep.
wave that flag about.
Yep.
When you listen to people who are actually in that business, though, they say, yeah, and the vast majority of vaccines that get to the point that these are right now wind up failing in the end. But yeah, it's nice seeing things getting to this point.
I did
Okay.
hear the head of the Flagstaff Epidemiological Institute, I forget its name offhand this morning, forgive me, speaking to a group of Lowell Observatory folks, say that when there is a vaccine, because eventually there will be a vaccine, we don't know when, what's the first thing you're going to do? Somebody asked him, and he said, I'm going to get vaccinated, and then I'm going to immediately get on a plane, and I'm going to go to somewhere that's really, really nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that works.
Just looking at
I'm
pictures
gonna
of Hawaii today.
get on a plane. Maybe if you can show your vaccination card, there will be places that are not going to be wanting Americans right now.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. What Trump was talking about, oh, we need to stop people coming in from Brazil because cases are getting out of hand in Brazil. And it's like saying, you realize that what you're saying there is you're living inside of a beehive and you're going to keep the bees out by closing the windows.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's the problem is the other direction.
Right.
But no, the question, I think that you're right, though. I think that on time scales of a couple of years, year and a half, whatever, that there is a very good chance we'll have that kind of a response.
Now we're extending the time scale now, however, pushing it farther out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, frankly, what we're doing right now is doing everything that we can do to make a vaccine moot.
Mm.
Yeah.
If we open things up and we can get enough people to just catch this virus and die in the meantime, then we don't need a vaccine because everybody will have had it. And so you can keep things tamped down, and you can figure out a way to live while they develop the vaccine, and you can live, or you throw everything open and just let it have its heyday.
It was good enough to work it that way 1,000 years ago. What's the problem now?
Sure, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now as we should.
Except it wasn't. I mean, for example, Newton. What was Newton doing when he and Halley got together, and Halley challenged him to actually write up what became the Principia?
Yep.
Well, tell the story.
What, you mean the part about him shoving needles in his eye?
No.
That's what he was doing when he was bored, right?
No, he was out
They
of
were
town
like,
writing out the plague, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's what they did then was people who had the money
Yes.
said,
What is
okay,
happening now?
I'm going to quarantine the hell out of myself because I don't want to have anything to do with that. And then the people who didn't have the money died.
Is
That's kind of like now.
Let me yes, how much is that part of that isolation, the people who are at home and they never go out, they can, how much of the anger of people rushing out and mixing it up in bars now is sort of resentment of the people who can completely isolate and never go? You know what I mean? Is there sort of a backlash reaction even now to that sort of thing?
That's an interesting question. I'm going to guess, and this is just a guess, but I would guess that if you look at the people who are now saying, hey, we're back in bars, this is great, that for the most part, those were people who actually were getting by okay.
Mm,
And I don't know that, but that's my
Well, they've got the
speculation.
money to go to the bar,
They've
so
got the money to go to the bars. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're in a position where they were working, they've got the money, they're going to go to the bar, fine.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, the question is yeah, there's going to come, hopefully there will be a vaccine, hopefully, on time scales of a year, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
But when that gets here, what will the state of play be? Will we have just let this thing run over us?
Mm-hmm.
Will we have been content to throw a bunch of people at the low end of the socioeconomic status to the wolves for this thing? Will we have, what will we have done up until that point?
Well, right now, the last week, we're rolling the dice again and saying, we think it's safer as a governmental policy, and you can go out there and whoever contracts this thing and dies, sorry. So the experiment, the box is open, and whatever happens now again. And so the caution is gone for the moment, for the next few weeks at least.
But you now look back. I mean, go forward. Go far enough forward that we're kind of through this, and you look back on this time. What have you learned about the United States? If you look back on, if you look back on this time anyway, even before COVID, that if you then add to that our response to COVID, what have you learned about the fundamental nature of the United States?
That it desperately, horrifyingly needs more education at the level of the ordinary people in this country.
And coherent leadership.
More education, coherent leadership.
Mm-hmm.
But again, those are things we can achieve. Those are not out of our grasp, and those are things I think that have been kind of a problem for a while anyway. So this is just a test that has come along to highlight the fact that these were actually problems before.
Mm-hmm.
What if I say you've also learned that our view of the world is morally bankrupt?
Well, I already knew that, so I didn't learn it. I guess I already figured it was that way.
Certainly would not disagree with that, though. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But
again, the United States has kind of, because of our own success, we have gotten to a point where we can say me, and that's again, I keep saying that we're victims of our own success. I really feel that has kind of been the case for a while. And yeah, you can take success and be a victim, or you can take success and do something really good with it. And we kind of went in the first direction, and maybe we can start moving in the second one now.
And that maybe enough comes to you ordinarily, without having to really be educated all that much, or pay your dues in other, what I mean? So there's a certain amount of an element of being spoiled as an American that has existed for a long time now, probably since the end of the Depression.
Yeah, and again, at least, my whole life, I'm, younger, but things have been pretty great as far as I'm concerned. And that's kind of been the problem. And maybe I don't want to say this is a good thing, but again, some adversity can become a good thing. And so this could be that, again, we kind of mentioned a turning point, and this could maybe be part of that turning point, and it shouldn't have to cost people their lives, but there's nothing we can do about that now. So
is that sustained feeling of entitlement because of a rockin' economy and a what was until a few decades ago a rising amount of wealth overall? Now you're actually making less for your work than you did 50 years ago, essentially, in terms of buying power. But does the sense of American entitlement really make us our own worst enemies?
Well, and I think the thing that I've noticed, at least again, maybe with some of the generational gap, is that millennials, and not again, not to be broad or sweeping, but a lot of millennials seem to be dealing with this better than older generations, because they have dealt with a little bit more adversity. Things have not been so great for, younger people my age and slightly younger. And I see them being kinder and them being more aware and more careful about social distancing. Now, again, there are millennials who are not doing any of those things, but it seems to be at least a trend, I think, that maybe they've dealt with some adversity and they're a little bit kinder and a little more self-aware.
Hey, Allison, just wait though. It gets a lot better as you get older.
Only if I can get there. So
well, of course,
get sick in the next, 6 months.
Yeah. The thing that you then have to turn around and think about is what fraction of today's diehard Trump voters at one point were out with long hair carrying "Hell no, we won't go" signs.
My dad is always kind of, again, his opinion is that, as you get older, you tend to get more conservative, and, whether that's clearly not always true, but
yeah, well,
it can be true.
whatever conservative, I'm not even sure what conservatives today think they're conservative, but
don't know, but
so
your view tends to change. Let's just say that.
I'm put it in different context. Again, the historical context. Coming out of the Great Depression, all right, we had the pandemic, we had World War I, we had the Great Depression, World War II. Coming out of that, we had taken a real beating, and yet we came out of that now with a very progressive tax structure, actually saying, if you're making a lot of money, that means you need to give a lot of money back. We came out of that with a New Deal. We came out of that with the idea that the US would actually step in and help people become productive following that. That's where you get things like the GI Bill emerging. And that's where you build most of the infrastructure that we still have today, and so on and so forth. And so one possibility is that we're going to go through all of this crap that we're going through, and we're going to come out on the other end and realize that, just letting free markets have their go isn't always the right thing to do, and that we actually are our brother's keeper in this world, or need to be, because what goes around comes around, and maybe we will decide to re-earn a place on the world stage. Maybe. And of course, the other possibility is we become, yet another banana republic. So
we've already in some senses become that, but only temporarily.
Well, but again, does it become temporary?
Right.
Does what we're going through right now actually provide us the pathway out of that, or does what we're going through right now just submit us into that? And
I'm going to say it provides the pathway out of that, given another few months and year or two.
Upon what do you base that assessment?
My analysis of what's going to happen in the next year.
Okay. What predictions do you have over the next 2 months?
The next 2 months are going to become much darker because as my father always used to say when I got discouraged with things, after the darkness comes dawn. But the darkest part of the night is so things are going to get bad after we open things up and declare it all getting better, and it's not actually going to be in many ways because we don't have testing and contact tracing and a vaccine yet. And so it's going to be grim in some ways over the coming weeks. But by the end of this year and next year, I say things are going to be improving in many respects.
Okay. A question, it's probably getting to be that time. We've been at this for about an hour. Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta go in 4 minutes.
I mean, a question, a place that we ought to take it. And again, we're not have fun on Mondays, because we're going to have fun on Mondays instead of doing this. But maybe a focus in the midst of all of this. There is an event coming up that's sort of sitting right in the middle of this time frame on which all of these changes are taking place, and that is the beginning of the school year.
Mhm.
And that's turning already to be a huge focus as people wanting to open, people
It's
that
not.
might make interesting, huh?
It's not going to. Schools are not going to open as they were before. It's just not going to happen.
Or they will
Again-
for 2 weeks, and then it's gonna get bad again.
Yeah, well,
We're gonna see.
but how will the politics of all of that play out?
Oh,
And you guys have a good weekend.
You too.
Enjoy your Memorial Day. Get out and do something fun. We will certainly try to as well.
Starbucks drive-through. That's gonna be my weekend.
There you go. All right, everybody. Take care.
Have fun. We'll see you next week.
All righty. Bye-bye.